Have you ever walked away from a conversation and suddenly realized something felt wrong? Not because someone insulted you, not because anyone raised their voice, but because somehow you felt smaller than when the conversation began. They smiled, they agreed with you, they even complimented you, yet something inside you quietly whispered, "That wasn't genuine." Most people ignore that feeling. They convince themselves they're overthinking, that they're becoming cynical, or that everyone deserves the benefit of the doubt. But what if that feeling isn't anxiety? What if it's perception? Schopenhauer believed that the greatest illusion isn't what people say. It's what they carefully choose not to reveal. Because beneath politeness, beneath friendship, beneath admiration, there is a side of human nature most people spend their entire lives refusing to see. And once you see it, you can never unsee it. Most of us grow up believing that people are exactly what they appear to be. If someone smiles, we assume they're kind. If someone praises us, we assume they genuinely admire us. If someone stays close to us for years, we assume loyalty is the reason. It feels natural to believe these things because our minds crave certainty. We want the world to be predictable. We want actions to match intentions. We want words to reveal the truth. But human beings have never worked that way. Long before psychology became a science, Arthur Schopenhauer observed something unsettling. He believed that every person carries two lives at the same time, the one they show and the one they protect. The first is carefully designed. It speaks politely. It smiles at the right moments. It knows what is socially acceptable. It adapts. It performs. The second life is almost invisible. It is made of silent desires, hidden fears, private resentments, unspoken comparisons, and motives that often remain unknown even to the person experiencing them. That is the hidden truth about human nature. People rarely reveal themselves completely, not because they are necessarily evil, but because self-preservation is one of the oldest instincts we possess. Think about the last time someone disappointed you. Was it sudden, or were there small signs that only became obvious after everything fell apart? Most people don't wake up one morning and become someone different. What changes is not their nature. It's your ability to finally see it. That realization can be uncomfortable because it forces another question. How many people around you have you mistaken for something they never truly were? Our brains are experts at completing missing information. A single compliment becomes proof of respect. One generous gesture becomes evidence of loyalty. A few years of friendship becomes certainty that someone would never betray us. But none of those conclusions are facts. They're stories. Stories we write because uncertainty makes us uncomfortable. Schopenhauer believed that suffering often begins not with reality, but with the illusions we build around reality. And perhaps no illusion is stronger than the one we create about other people. We don't simply observe them, we imagine them. We fill the empty spaces with hope, with expectation, with trust. Then one day, reality quietly removes the mask we created, and we call it betrayal. But was it betrayal, or was it recognition? There is a reason why truly observant people rarely rush to define someone's character. They understand something that most of us learn too late. Character is not revealed by moments of comfort. It is revealed by moments of pressure. Almost anyone can appear generous when generosity costs nothing. Almost anyone can appear patient when life is easy. Almost anyone can appear loyal when loyalty demands no sacrifice. But pressure changes everything. Pressure exposes priorities. Pressure exposes fear. Pressure exposes desire. And desire has a remarkable way of overpowering the image people try so carefully to maintain. That is why the most revealing moments in life are rarely dramatic. Sometimes they happen during a promotion, sometimes during an unexpected success, sometimes after a rejection, or when someone else receives the attention they secretly wanted for themselves. Those quiet moments often reveal more about human nature than years of ordinary conversation, because beneath every polished personality, there is a hierarchy of instincts: the desire to belong, the fear of being insignificant, the need for recognition, the instinct to protect one's own interests. These forces are rarely visible, yet they quietly influence conversations, friendships, relationships, families, even acts of kindness. And once you begin noticing them, you realize something unsettling. Words are often the least reliable part of human behavior. People describe themselves according to the person they wish they were, but behavior quietly introduces the person they actually are. This is why Schopenhauer placed so little trust in appearances, not because he believed everyone was malicious, but because appearances are designed to be seen. Human nature is not. It reveals itself only in fragments, in hesitation, in silence, in the expression that disappears the moment someone realizes you're watching, in the compliment that feels slightly forced, in the smile that never reaches the eyes, in the strange discomfort you feel without being able to explain why. Most people dismiss those moments. They tell themselves they're imagining things, that they're overthinking, that they're becoming cynical. But sometimes, what we call intuition is simply the mind recognizing patterns before logic has enough evidence to explain them. And if that is true, then perhaps the greatest mistake isn't trusting people. Perhaps the greatest mistake is believing that what people choose to show is all that exists. If human nature were obvious, life would be much simpler. You would always know who truly supports you. You would immediately recognize genuine admiration from hidden resentment. You would never mistake convenience for loyalty or politeness for respect. But evolution never rewarded complete transparency. It rewarded survival, and survival often required something far more useful than honesty. It required adaptation. This is one of the reasons human behavior is so difficult to understand. People don't simply react to reality. They react to how reality affects the image they have of themselves. That image is one of the most protected things in existence. Schopenhauer understood this long before psychologists began describing the mechanisms of the ego. Most people don't consciously lie every day. Instead, they unconsciously edit themselves. They emphasize qualities that make them admirable. They minimize impulses that make them uncomfortable. They rewrite memories. They justify decisions. They explain away contradictions. Not because they enjoy deception, but because admitting certain truths would force them to confront parts of themselves they would rather never meet. This is why human beings are capable of believing two completely opposite things at the same time. They can genuinely care about someone while secretly hoping not to see that person surpass them. They can celebrate another person's success while quietly comparing it to everything they haven't achieved. These contradictions aren't rare, they're remarkably common, and perhaps that is the first hidden mechanism most people refuse to accept. Admiration and competition often live inside the same heart. Think about how often success changes relationships. Not because success changes character, but because success exposes emotions that were already there. As long as two people are struggling together, their bond feels effortless. There is no comparison, no imbalance, no uncomfortable reminder of unrealized dreams. But when one person begins to grow, something subtle happens. The relationship is no longer measured only by affection. It becomes measured against identity. Without realizing it, people begin asking silent questions they would never dare speak aloud. Why them? What makes them different? What do they have that I don't? Most of the time, these questions never become words. They become distance, coldness, sarcasm disguised as humor, support that slowly disappears. Not because people suddenly became cruel, but because comparison quietly transformed the way they perceived someone they once considered equal. Schopenhauer believed that envy rarely announces itself honestly. It wears disguises. Sometimes it appears as indifference, sometimes as excessive criticism, sometimes as advice that always seems to discourage rather than encourage. And because these disguises appear reasonable, they are incredibly difficult to recognize. That is why the most dangerous emotions are rarely the loudest ones. Hatred is obvious. Contempt eventually reveals itself. But silent comparison can exist for years without either person fully understanding what has changed. Have you ever noticed how some people become strangely uncomfortable when you begin changing your life? Not because you've harmed them, not because you've become arrogant, simply because your growth reminds them of the version of themselves they abandoned long ago. That discomfort has very little to do with you. It has everything to do with the conversation taking place inside their own mind. The tragedy is that most people never realize this. Instead, they desperately try to regain the approval they feel slipping away. They explain themselves. They become smaller. They apologize for growing. They dim their ambitions, hoping the relationship will return to what it once was. But relationships built on equality of circumstance often struggle to survive inequality of progress. This doesn't mean success isolates you. It means success reveals the true foundation upon which many relationships were built. Schopenhauer warned, that much of human suffering comes from expecting permanence where only change exists. People change. Circumstances change. Interests change. Even identities change. And yet we continue expecting every relationship to remain frozen in time. Perhaps that expectation is what hurts us most. Not because people betrayed us, but because we expected them never to evolve beyond the role we had assigned to them. There is another mechanism even more subtle, one that almost everyone experiences, but very few notice. People rarely reveal themselves through what they say. They reveal themselves through what consistently captures their attention. Watch where someone's eyes go when they enter a room. Listen to what they repeatedly bring into conversation. Observe what they celebrate and what quietly bothers them. Attention is one of the purest expressions of desire. Long before actions become visible, attention has already chosen a direction. And desire, more than words, is what shapes human behavior. Once you begin seeing this, you stop trying to decode every sentence people speak. Instead, you begin observing patterns, because patterns are far more honest than promises. And slowly, without becoming cynical, you begin understanding something Schopenhauer believed all along. Human nature doesn't hide because it enjoys deception. It hides because every human being is constantly trying to protect an identity, even from themselves. And perhaps that is why understanding people requires something far more powerful than intelligence. It requires the patience to watch who they become. When life quietly removes the mask they never realized they were wearing. There comes a moment, usually after enough disappointments, when something inside you quietly changes. Not because you've lost faith in people, but because you finally stopped confusing appearances with reality. At first, this realization can feel lonely. You begin noticing conversations that once seemed genuine, now filled with subtle performances. You recognize compliments that are offered more out of obligation than admiration. You see enthusiasm that disappears the moment no one is watching. And for a while, it becomes tempting to believe that everyone is pretending, that no kindness is sincere, that every friendship hides an agenda. But that isn't wisdom. It's simply another illusion. Schopenhauer never suggested that human beings were incapable of goodness. He suggested something far more uncomfortable, that every act, no matter how noble it appears, passes through the complex reality of human desire. People can be generous and still seek recognition. They can love deeply and still struggle with jealousy. They can remain loyal while silently fighting their own insecurities. Human nature is rarely pure. It is layered, contradictory, beautiful in one moment, fragile in the next. Perhaps maturity begins the moment we stop demanding perfect consistency from imperfect people Because perfection has never existed. Only expectation has. And expectation, more than reality, is often the true source of suffering. Think about how much emotional energy people spend trying to change others, trying to convince someone to become more honest, more appreciative, more loyal, more understanding, as if enough effort could reshape another person's character. But character doesn't change because someone wishes it would. It changes only when a person willingly confronts themselves. And that is a journey no one can complete for another human being. This is why wisdom gradually replaces control with observation, instead of asking, "How do I make people treat me differently?" A wiser question becomes, "What are people consistently showing me?" The answer is almost always there, not hidden inside speeches, but inside patterns. Patterns never need to announce themselves. Someone who values your presence creates space for you. Someone who respects you doesn't only respect you when it's convenient. Someone who admires your growth doesn't become uncomfortable the moment you succeed. Words fluctuate. Emotions fluctuate. Circumstances fluctuate. Patterns endure. Perhaps that is why truly perceptive people speak less. Not because they have nothing to say, but because they have learned that constant talking often interrupts constant observing. Silence creates distance, and distance reveals proportion. It allows emotions to settle before judgment is made. It allows behavior to repeat often enough for truth to emerge naturally. The world celebrates quick opinions, instant conclusions, immediate reactions, but reality rarely reveals itself that quickly. The deepest truths arrive slowly, one repeated action at a time. Schopenhauer believed that suffering decreases as illusion decreases, not because life becomes easier, but because reality becomes clearer. You stop expecting loyalty where there has only been convenience. You stop expecting honesty from those who have never been honest with themselves. You stop demanding permanence from people whose entire lives are built upon change. Surprisingly, this doesn't make you colder, it makes you calmer. You no longer waste energy trying to force reality to match your expectations. You simply allow reality to introduce itself. And once you begin living this way, something remarkable happens. Disappointment loses much of its power, not because people become better, but because your vision becomes sharper. You stop chasing explanations for every strange behavior. You stop taking every rejection personally. You stop assuming that someone else's actions always define your worth. Instead, you recognize one of the quietest truths Schopenhauer ever pointed toward. Every person is fighting desires, fears, and insecurities that remain invisible to everyone else. Understanding this doesn't excuse betrayal. It doesn't justify dishonesty. It doesn't require blind tolerance. It simply reminds you that human beings are infinitely more complex than the roles they perform in public. And perhaps, the hidden truth about human nature isn't that people are secretly evil. It's that people are rarely as simple as we desperately want them to be. The greatest freedom comes the day you stop demanding certainty from uncertainty. The day you stop believing that words define character. The day you realize that behavior, patiently observed over time, will always tell the story that appearances try to hide. From that moment on, you don't become suspicious, you become discerning. You don't isolate yourself from the world. You simply stop handing your trust to appearances. Because real understanding isn't born from judging people. It's born from seeing them clearly, without illusions, without resentment, without naivety, just clarity. And perhaps that quiet clarity is the closest thing to wisdom we can ever possess. If this perspective changed the way you see people, subscribe to the channel. Because the loudest lessons rarely transform us. The quiet ones do. And remember, power isn't found in speaking louder than everyone else. It's found in seeing what everyone else overlooks.